Chapter 10 of The Egoist. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander. Chapter 10, in which Sir Willoughby chances to supply the title for himself. Now Vernon was useful to his cousin. He was the accomplished secretary of a man who governed his estates shrewdly and diligently, but had been once or twice unlucky in his judgments pronounced from the magisterial bench as a justice of peace, on which occasions a half column of trenchant English supported by an apposite classical quotation impressed Sir Willoughby with the value of such a secretary in a controversy. He had no fear of that fiery dragon of scorching breath, the newspaper press, while Vernon was his right-hand man; and as he intended to enter Parliament, he foresaw the greater need of him. Furthermore, he liked his cousin to date his own controversial writings on classical subjects from Patterne Hall. It caused his house to shine in a foreign field, proved the service of scholarship by giving it a flavour of bookish aristocracy that, though not so well worth having, and indeed in itself contemptible, is above the material and titular, one cannot quite say how. There, however, is the flavour. Dainty sauces are the life, the nobility of famous dishes, taken alone. The former would be nauseating, the latter plebeian. It is thus, or somewhat so, when you have a poet, still better a scholar, attached to your household. Sir Willoughby deserved to have him, for he was above his county friends in his apprehension of the flavour bestowed by the man, and having him, he had made them conscious of their deficiency. His cook, Monsieur de Horse, pupil of the great Godefroy, was not the only French cook in the county, but his cousin and secretary, the rising scholar, the elegant essayist, was an unparalleled decoration, of his kind, of course. Personally, we laugh at him. You had better not, unless you are fain to show that the higher world of polite literature is unknown to you. Sir Willoughby could create an abject silence at a county dinner table by an allusion to Vernon, at work at home upon his Etruscans or historians, and he paused a moment to let the allusion sink, laughed audibly to himself over his eccentric cousin, and let him rest. In addition, Sir Willoughby abhorred the loss of a familiar face in his domestic circle. He thought ill of servants who could accept their dismissal without petitioning to stay with him. A servant that gave warning partook of a certain fiendishness. Vernon's project of leaving the Hall offended and alarmed the sensitive gentleman. "I shall have to hand Letty Dale to him at last," he thought, yielding in bitter generosity to the conditions imposed on him by the ungenerousness of another. For since his engagement to Miss Middleton, his electrically forethoughtful mind had seen in Miss Dale, if she stayed in the neighbourhood, and remained unmarried, the governess of his infant children, often consulting with him. But here was a prospect dashed out. The two, then, may marry and live in a cottage on the borders of his park, and Vernon can retain his post, and Laetitia her devotion. The risk of her casting it off had to be faced. Marriage has been known to have such an effect on the most faithful of women that a great passion fades to naught in their volatile bosoms when they have taken a husband. We see in women especially the triumph of the animal over the spiritual. Nevertheless, risks must be run for a purpose in view. Having no taste for a discussion with Vernon, whom it was his habit to confound by breaking away from him abruptly when he had delivered his opinion, he left it to both the persons interesting themselves in young Crossjay to imagine that he was meditating on the question of the lad, and to imagine that it would be wise to leave him to meditate. For he could be preternaturally acute in reading any of his fellow creatures if they crossed the current of his feelings, and meanwhile he instructed the ladies Eleanor and Isabel to bring Laetitia Dale on a visit to the Hall, where dinner parties were soon to be given, and a pleasing talker would be wanted, where also a woman of intellect, steeped in a splendid sentiment, hitherto a miracle of female constancy, might stir a younger woman to some emulation. Definitely, to resolve to bestow Laetitia upon Vernon was more than he could do. Enough that he held the card. Regarding Clara, his genius for perusing the heart which was not in perfect harmony with him, though the series of responsive movements to his own informed him of a something in her character that might have suggested to Mrs. Mountstuart Jenkinson her indefensible, absurd, rouge in porcelain idea, there was none in that phrase. Yet if you looked on Clara as a delicately inimitable porcelain beauty, the suspicion of a delicately inimitable ripple over her features touched a thought of innocent roguery, wildwood roguery. The likeness to the costly and lovely substance appeared to admit a fitness in the dubious epithet. He detested, but was haunted by the phrase. She certainly had at times the look of the nymph that had gazed too long on the faun, and has unwittingly copied his lurking lip and long sliding eye. Her play with young Crossjay resembled a return of the lady to the cat. She flung herself into it as if her real vitality had been in suspense till she saw the boy. Sir Willoughby by no means disapproved of a physical liveliness that promised him health in his mate, but he began to feel in their conversations that she did not sufficiently think of making herself a nest for him. Steely points were opposed to him when he, figuratively, bared his bosom to be taken to the softest and fairest. She reasoned, in other words, armed her ignorance. She reasoned against him publicly, and lured Vernon to support her. Influence is to be counted for power, and her influence over Vernon was displayed in her persuading him to dance one evening at Lady Culmer's, after his melancholy exhibitions of himself in the art. And not only did she persuade him to stand up fronting her, she manoeuvred him through the dance like a clever boy cajoling a top to come to him without reeling, both to Vernon's contentment and to Sir Willoughby's, for he was the last man to object to a manifestation of power in his bride. Considering her influence with Vernon, he renewed the discourse upon young Crossjay, and, as he was addicted to system, he took her into his confidence, that she might be taught to look to him and act for him.
"Old Vernon has not spoken to you again of that lad?" he said.
Yes, Mr. Whitford has asked me.
"He does not ask me, my dear."
He may fancy me of greater aid than I am.
"You see, my love, if he puts Crossjay on me, he will be off. He has this craze for enlisting his pen in London, as he calls it, and I am accustomed to him. I don't like to think of him as a hack scribe, writing nonsense from dictation to earn a pitiful subsistence. I want him here, and supposing he goes he offends me. He loses a friend, and it will not be the first time that a friend has tried me too far. But if he offends me, he is extinct."
Is what? Cried Clara, with a look of fright.
He becomes to me at once as if he had never been. He is extinct.
In spite of your affection?
On account of it, I might say. Our nature is mysterious, and mine as much so as any. Whatever my regrets, he goes out. This is not a language I talk to the world. I do the man no harm. I am not to be named unchristian, but
Sir Willoughby mildly shrugged and indicated a spreading out of the arms. But do talk to me as you talk to the world, Willoughby. Give me some relief.
My own Clara, we are one. You should know me at my worst, we will say, if you like, as well as at my best.
Should I speak too?
What could you have to confess?
She hung silent. The wave of an insane resolution swelled in her bosom and subsided before she said, "Cowardice, incapacity to speak."
"Women!"
said he. We do not expect so much of women, the heroic virtues as little as the vices. They have not to unfold the scroll of character. He resumed, and by his tone she understood that she was now in the inner temple of him.
"I tell you these things. I quite acknowledge they do not elevate me. They help to constitute my character. I tell you most humbly that I have in me much, too much, of the fallen archangel's pride."
Clara bowed her head over a sustained in-drawn breath.
"It must be pride,"
he said, in a reverie superinduced by her thoughtfulness over the revelation, and glorying in the black flames demoniacal wherewith he crowned himself. "Can you not correct it?" said she. He replied, profoundly vexed by disappointment.
"I am what I am. It might be demonstrated to you mathematically that it is corrected by equivalents or substitutions in my character, if it be a failing assuming that."
"It seems to me so cruelly to punish Mr. Whitford for seeking to improve his fortunes."
"He reflects on my share in his fortunes. He has had but to apply to me for his honorarium to be doubled."
"He wishes for independence."
"Independence of me."
"Liberty."
"At my expense."
"Oh, Willoughby!"
"Ay, but this is the world, and I know it, my love. And beautiful as your incredulity may be, you will find it more comforting to confide in my knowledge of the selfishness of the world. My sweetest, you will? You do? For a breath of difference between us is intolerable. Do you not feel how it breaks our magic ring? One small fissure, and we have the world with its muddy deluge. But my subject was old Vernon. Yes, I pay for Crossjay, if Vernon consents to stay. I waive my own scheme for the lad, though I think it the better one. Now then, to induce Vernon to stay. He has his ideas about staying under a mistress of the household, and therefore, not to contest it, he is a man of no argument. A sort of lunatic determination takes the place of it with old Vernon. Let him settle close by me in one of my cottages. Very well, and to settle him we must marry him."
"Who is there?" said Clara, beating for the lady in her mind.
"Women," said Willoughby, "are born matchmakers, and the most persuasive in a young bride. With a man, and a man like old Vernon, she is irresistible. It is my wish, and that arms you. It is your wish that subjugates him. If he goes for good. If he stays, he is my friend. I deal simply with him as with every one. It is the secret of authority. Now, Miss Dale will soon lose her father. He exists on a pension. She has the prospect of having to leave the neighbourhood of the Hall, unless she is established near us. Her whole heart is in this region. It is the poor soul's passion. Count on her agreeing. But she will require a little wooing, and old Vernon wooing. Picture the scene to yourself, my love. His notion of wooing, I suspect, will be to treat the lady like a lexicon, and turn over the leaves for the word, and fly through the leaves for another word, and so get a sentence. Don't frown at the poor old fellow, my Clara. Some have the language on their tongues, and some have not. Some are very dry sticks, manly men, honest fellows, but so cut away, so polished away from the sex, that they are in absolute want of outsiders to supply the silken filaments to attach them, actually. Sir Willoughby laughed in Clara's face to relax the dreamy stoniness of her look. "But I can assure you, my dearest, I have seen it. Vernon does not know how to speak, as we speak. He has, or he had, what is called a sneaking affection for Miss Dale. It was the most amusing thing possible, his courtship. The air of a dog with an uneasy conscience trying to reconcile himself with his master. We were all in fits of laughter. Of course it came to nothing.
"Will Mr. Whitford," said Clara, "offend you to extinction if he declines?" Willoughby breathed an affectionate "Tush!" to her silliness.
We bring them together as we best can, you see, Clara. I desire, and I will make some sacrifices to detain him."
"But what do you sacrifice? A cottage?" said Clara, combative at all points.
An ideal, perhaps. I lay no stress on sacrifice. I strongly object to separations, and therefore, you will say, I prepare the ground for unions. Put your influence to good service, my love. I believe you could persuade him to give us the Highland fling on the drawing room table.
"There is nothing to say to him of Crossjay?"
We hold Crossjay in reserve.
"It is urgent."
Trust me, I have my ideas. I am not idle. That boy bids fair for a capital horseman. Eventualities might.
Sir Willoughby murmured to himself, and addressing his bride,
The cavalry? If we put him into the cavalry, we might make a gentleman of him, not to be ashamed of him. Or, under certain eventualities, the Guards. Think it over, my love. De Craye, who will, I suppose, act best man for me, supposing old Vernon to pull at the collar, is a lieutenant colonel in the Guards, a thorough gentleman, of the brainless class, if you like, but an elegant fellow, an Irishman. You will see him, and I should like to set a naval lieutenant beside him in a drawing room, for you to compare them and consider the model you would choose for a boy you are interested in. Horace is grace and gallantry incarnate. Fatuous, probably. I have always been too friendly with him to examine closely. He made himself one of my dogs, though my elder, and seemed to like to be at my heels. One of the few men's faces I can call admirably handsome, with nothing behind it, perhaps. As Vernon says, a nothing picked by the vultures and bleached by the desert. Not a bad talker, if you are satisfied with keeping up the ball. He will amuse you. Old Horace does not know how amusing he is.
"Did Mr. Whitford say that of Colonel De Craye?"
I forget the person of whom he said it. So you have noticed old Vernon's foible? Quote him one of his epigrams, and he is in motion head and heels. It is an infallible receipt for turning him. If I want to have him in good temper, I have only to remark, as you said. I straighten his back instantly.
"I," said Clara, "have noticed chiefly his anxiety concerning the boy, for which I admire him."
Creditable, if not particularly far-sighted and sagacious. Well, then, my dear, attack him at once. Lead him to the subject of our fair neighbour. She is to be our guest for a week or so, and the whole affair might be concluded far enough to fix him before she leaves. She is at present awaiting the arrival of a cousin to attend on her father. A little gentle pushing will precipitate old Vernon on his knees as far as he ever can unbend them. But when a lady is made ready to expect a declaration, you know why she does not, does she, demand the entire formula, though some beautiful fortresses?
He enfolded her. Clara was growing hardened to it. To this she was fated, and not seeing any way to escape, she invoked a friendly frost to strike her blood, and passed through the minute unfeelingly. Having passed it, she reproached herself for making so much of it, thinking it a lesser endurance than to listen to him. What could she do? She was caged by her word of honour, as she at one time thought, by her cowardice, at another, and dimly sensible that the latter was a stronger lock than the former. She mused on the abstract question, whether a woman's cowardice can be so absolute as to cast her into the jaws of her aversion? Is it to be conceived? Is there not a moment when it stands at bay? But haggard visaged honour then starts up, claiming to be dealt with in turn. For having courage restored to her, she must have the courage to break with honour. She must dare to be faithless, and not merely say, I will be brave, but be brave enough to be dishonourable. The cage of a plighted woman hungering for her disengagement has two keepers, a noble and a vile. Where on earth is creature so dreadfully enclosed? It lies with her to overcome what degrades her, that she may win to liberty by overcoming what exalts. Contemplating her situation, this idea, or vapour of youth taking the godlike semblance of an idea, sprang, born of her present sickness, in Clara's mind, that it must be an ill constructed tumbling world, where the hour of ignorance is made the creator of our destiny, by being forced to the decisive elections, upon which life's main issues hang. Her teacher had brought her to contemplate his view of the world. She thought likewise, how must a man despise women who can expose himself as he does to me? Miss Middleton owed it to Sir Willoughby Patterne that she ceased to think like a girl. When had the great change begun? Glancing back, she could imagine that it was near the period we call in love the first, almost from the first. And she was led to imagine it through having become barred from imagining her own emotions of that season. They were so dead as not to arise even under the form of shadows in fancy. Without imputing blame to him, for she was reasonable so far, she deemed herself a person entrapped. In a dream somehow she had committed herself to a lifelong imprisonment. And, oh terror! not in a quiet dungeon. The barren walls closed round her, talked, called for ardour, expected admiration. She was unable to say why she could not give it, why she retreated more and more inwardly, why she invoked the frost to kill her tenderest feelings. She was in revolt, until a whisper of the day of bells reduced her to blank submission, out of which a breath of peace drew her to revolt again in gradual rapid stages, and once more the aspect of that singular day of merry blackness felled her to earth. It was alive, it advanced, it had a mouth, it had a song. She received letters of bridesmaids writing of it, and felt them as waves that hurl a log of wreck to shore. Following which afflicting sense of antagonism to the whole circle sweeping on with her, she considered the possibility of her being in a commencement of madness. Otherwise might she not be accused of a capriciousness quite as deplorable to consider? She had written to certain of these young ladies not very long since of this gentleman. How? In what tone? And was it her madness then? Her recovery now? It seemed to her that to have written of him enthusiastically resembled madness more than to shudder away from the union, but standing alone, opposing all she had consented to set in motion, is too strange to a girl for perfect justification to be found in reason when she seeks it. Sir Willoughby was destined himself to supply her with that key of special insight which revealed and stamped him in a title to fortify her spirit of revolt, consecrate it almost. The popular physician of the county and famous anecdotal wit, Dr. Corney, had been a guest at dinner overnight, and the next day there was talk of him, and of the resources of his art displayed by Armand Dehors, on his hearing that he was to minister to the tastes of a gathering of hommes d'esprit. Sir Willoughby glanced at Dehors with his customary benevolent irony in speaking of the persons, great in their way, who served him.
Why, he cannot give us daily so good a dinner. One must, I suppose, go to French nature to learn. The French are in the habit of making up for all their deficiencies with enthusiasm. They have no reverence. If I had said to him, I want something particularly excellent, Dehors, I should have had a commonplace dinner. But they have enthusiasm on draught, and that is what we must pull at. Know one Frenchman, and you know France. I have had Dehors under my eye 2 years, and I can mount his enthusiasm at a word. He took hommes d'esprit to denote men of letters. Frenchmen have destroyed their nobility, so for the sake of excitement they put up the literary man. Not to worship him, that they can't do. It's to put themselves in a state of effervescence. They will not have real greatness above them, so they have sham. That they must justly call it equality, perhaps. Ay, for all your shake of the head, my good Vernon, you see, human nature comes round again, try as we may to upset it, and the French only differ from us in wading through blood to discover that they are at their old trick once more. I am your equal, sir, your born equal. Oh, you are a man of letters. Allow me to be in a bubble about you. Yes, Vernon, and I believe the fellow looks up to you as the head of the establishment. I am not jealous, provided he attends to his functions. There's a French philosopher who's for naming the days of the year after the birthdays of French men of letters, Voltaire Day, Rousseau Day, Racine Day, so on. Perhaps Vernon will inform us who takes April 1st. A few trifling errors are of no consequence when you are in the vein of satire, said Vernon. Be satisfied with knowing a nation in the person of a cook. They may be reading us English off in a jockey, said Dr. Middleton. I believe that jockeys are the exchange we make for cooks, and our neighbours do not get the best of the bargain. No, but my dear good Vernon, it's nonsensical, said Sir Willoughby. Why be bawling every day the name of men of letters? Philosophers. Well, philosophers. Of all countries and times, and they are the benefactors of humanity. Ben! Sir Willoughby's derisive laugh broke the word. There's a pretension in all that, irreconcilable with English sound sense. Surely you see it? We might, said Vernon, if you like, give alternative titles to the days, or have alternating days, devoted to our great families that performed meritorious deeds upon such a day. The rebel Clara, delighting in his banter, was heard. Can we furnish sufficient? A poet or two could help us. Perhaps a statesman, she suggested. A pugilist if wanted. For blowy days, observed Dr. Middleton, and hastily in penitence picked up the conversation he had unintentionally prostrated, with a general remark on new fangled notions, and a word aside to Vernon, which created the blissful suspicion in Clara that her father was indisposed to second Sir Willoughby's opinions even when sharing them. Sir Willoughby had led the conversation. Displeased that the lead should be withdrawn from him, he turned to Clara and related one of the after dinner anecdotes of Dr. Corney, and another, with a vast deal of human nature in it, concerning a valetudinarian gentleman whose wife chanced to be desperately ill, and he went to the physicians assembled in consultation outside the sick room, imploring them by all he valued, and in tears, to save the poor patient for him, saying, "She is everything to me, everything, and if she dies I am compelled to run the risks of marrying again. I must marry again, for she has accustomed me so to the little attentions of a wife, that in truth I can't lose her. She must be saved." And the loving husband of any devoted wife wrung his hands. Now there, Clara, there you have the Egoist, added Sir Willoughby. That is the perfect Egoist. You see what he comes to, and his wife. The man was utterly unconscious of giving vent to the grossest selfishness."
"An Egoist," said Clara.
"Beware of marrying an Egoist, my dear."
He bowed gallantly, and so blindly fatuous did he appear to her that she could hardly believe him guilty of uttering the words she had heard from him, and kept her eyes on him vacantly till she came to a sudden full stop in the thoughts directing her gaze. She looked at Vernon, she looked at her father, and at the ladies Eleanor and Isabel. None of them saw the man in the word, none noticed the word. Yet this word was her medical herb, her illuminating lamp, the key of him, and alas, but she thought it by feeling her need of one, the advocate pleading in apology for her. Egoist! She beheld him unfortunate, self-designated man that he was, in his good qualities as well as bad, under the implacable lamp, and his good were drenched in his first person singular. His generosity roared of I louder than the rest. Conceive him at the age of Dr. Corney's hero.
"Pray save my wife for me. I shall positively have to get another if I lose her, and one who may not love me half so well, or understand the peculiarities of my character, and appreciate my attitudes."
He was in his 32nd year, therefore a young man, strong and healthy, yet his garrulous return to his principal theme, his emphasis on I and me, lent him the seeming of an old man spotted with decaying youth.
"Beware of marrying an Egoist."
Would he help her to escape? The idea of the scene ensuing upon her petition for release, and the being dragged round the walls of his egoism, and having her head knocked against the corners, alarmed her with sensations of sickness. There was the example of Constantia, but that desperate young lady had been assisted by a gallant, loving gentleman. She had met a Captain Oxford. Clara brooded on those two until they seemed heroic. She questioned herself, could she, were one to come? She shut her eyes in languor, leaning the wrong way of her wishes, yet unable to say no. Sir Willoughby had positively said beware. Marrying him would be a deed committed in spite of his express warning. She went so far as to conceive him subsequently saying,
"I warned you."
She conceived the state of marriage with him as that of a woman tied, not to a man of heart, but to an obelisk lettered all over with hieroglyphics, and everlastingly hearing him expound them, relishing renewing his lectures on them. Full surely this immovable stone man would not release her. This petrification of egoism would from amazedly to austerely refuse the petition. His pride would debar him from understanding her desire to be released. And if she resolved on it, without doing it straightway in Constantia's manner, the miserable bewilderment of her father, for whom such a complication would be a tragic dilemma, had to be thought of. Her father, with all his tenderness for his child, would make a stand on the point of honour. Though certain to yield to her, he would be distressed in a tempest of worry. And Dr. Middleton, thus afflicted, threw up his arms. He shunned books, shunned speech, and resembled a castaway on the ocean, with nothing between himself and his calamity. As for the world, it would be barking at her heels. She might call the man she wrenched her hands from Egoist. Jilt, the world would call her. She dwelt bitterly on her agreement with Sir Willoughby regarding the world, laying it to his charge that her garden had become a place of nettles, her horizon an unlighted fourth side of a square. Clara passed from person to person visiting the hall. There was universal, and, as she was compelled to see, honest admiration of the host. Not a soul had a suspicion of his cloaked nature. Her agony of hypocrisy in accepting their compliments as the bride of Sir Willoughby Patterne was poorly moderated by contempt of them for their infatuation. She tried to cheat herself with the thought that they were right and that she was the foolish and wicked inconstant. In her anxiety to strangle the rebelliousness which had been communicated from her mind to her blood, and was present with her whether her mind was in action or not, she encouraged the ladies Eleanor and Isabel to magnify the fictitious man of their idolatry, hoping that she might enter into them imaginatively, that she might to some degree subdue herself to the necessity of her position. If she partly succeeded in stupefying her antagonism, 5 minutes of him undid the work. He requested her to wear the Patterne pearls for a dinner party of grand ladies, telling her that he would commission Miss Isabel to take them to her. Clara begged leave to decline them, on the plea of having no right to wear them. He laughed at her modish modesty.
But really, it might almost be classed with affection, said he. I give you the right. Virtually, you are my wife.
No.
Before heaven?
No, we are not married.
As my betrothed, will you wear them to please me?
I would rather not. I cannot wear borrowed jewels. These I cannot wear, forgive me. I cannot. And, Willoughby, she said, scorning herself for want of fortitude in not keeping to the simply blunt provocative refusal, does one not look like a victim decked for the sacrifice, the garland heifer you see on Greek vases in that array of jewellery?
My dear Clara, exclaimed the astonished lover, how can you term them borrowed, when they are the Patterne jewels, our family heirloom pearls, unmatched, I venture to affirm, decidedly in my county and many others, and passing to the use of the mistress of the house in the natural course of things?
They are yours. They are not mine.
Prospectively they are yours.
It would be to anticipate the fact to wear them.
With my consent, my approval, at my request?
I am not yet. I never may be.
My wife?
He laughed triumphantly, and silenced her by manly smothering. Her scruple was perhaps an honourable one, he said. Perhaps the jewels were safer in their iron box. He had merely intended a surprise and gratification to her. Courage was coming to enable her to speak more plainly, when this, discontinuing to insist on her wearing the jewels, under the appearance of deference of her wishes, disarmed her by touching her sympathies. She said, however, "I fear we do not often agree, Willoughby."
When you are a little older, was the irritating answer.
It would then be too late to make the discovery.
The discovery, I apprehend, is not imperative, my love.
It seems to me that our minds are opposed.
I should, said he, have been awake to it at a single indication, be sure.
But I know, she pursued, I have learned that the ideal of conduct for women is to subject their minds to the part of an accompaniment.
For women, my love? My wife will be in a natural harmony with me.
Ah! She compressed her lips. The yawn would come. I am sleepier here than anywhere.
Ours, my Clara, is the finest air of the kingdom. It has the effect of sea air.
But if I am always asleep here?
We shall have to make a public exhibition of the beauty.
This dash of his liveliness defeated her. She left him, feeling the contempt of the brain feverishly quickened and fine pointed, for the brain chewing the cud in the happy pastures of unawakedness. So violent was the fever, so keen her introspection, that she spared few, and Vernon was not among them. Young Crossjay, whom she considered the least able of all to act as an ally, was the only one she courted with a real desire to please him. He was the one she affectionately envied. He was the youngest, the freest. He had the world before him, and he did not know how horrible the world was, or could be made to look. She loved the boy from expecting nothing of him. Others, Vernon Whitford for instance, could help and moved no hand. He read her case. A scrutiny so penetrating under its air of abstract thoughtfulness, though his eyes did but rest on her a second or two, signified that he read her line by line, and to the end, expecting what she thought of him for probing her with that sharp steel of insight without a purpose. She knew her mind's injustice. It was her case, her lamentable case, the impatient panic-stricken nerves of a captured wild creature which cried for help. She exaggerated her sufferings to get strength to throw them off, and lost it in the recognition that they were exaggerated, and out of the conflict issued recklessness, with a cry as wild as any coming of madness. For she did not blush in saying to herself, "If some one loved me!" Before hearing of Constantia, she had mused upon liberty as a virgin goddess. Men were out of her thoughts. Even the figure of a rescuer, if one dawned in her mind, was more angel than hero. That fair childish maidenliness had ceased, with her body straining in her dragon's grasp, with a savour of loathing. Unable to contend, unable to speak aloud, she began to speak to herself, and all the health of her nature made her outcry womanly, "If I were loved!" Not for the sake of love, but for free breathing, and her utterance of it was to insure life and enduringness to the wish, as the yearning of a mother on a drowning ship is to get her infant to shore. If some noble gentleman could see me as I am, and not disdain to aid me! Oh, to be caught up out of this prison of thorns and brambles! I cannot tear my own way out. I am a coward. My cry for help confesses that. A beckoning of a finger would change me, I believe. I could fly, bleeding and through hootings, to a comrade. Oh, a comrade! I do not want a lover. I should find another Egoist, not so bad, but enough to make me take a breath like death. I could follow a soldier like poor Sally or Molly. He stakes his life for his country, and a woman may be proud of the worst of men who do that. Constantia met a soldier. Perhaps she prayed and her prayer was answered. She did ill, but oh, how I love her for it! His name was Harry Oxford. Papa would call him her Perseus. She must have felt that there was no explaining what she suffered. She had only to act, to plunge. First she fixed her mind on Harry Oxford. To be able to speak his name and see him awaiting her must have been relief, a reprieve. She did not waver. She cut the links. She signed herself over. Oh, brave girl! What do you think of me? But I have no Harry Whitford. I am alone. Let anything be said against women, we must be very bad to have such bad things written of us. Only say this, that to ask them to sign themselves over by oath and ceremony, because of an ignorant promise, to the man they have been mistaken in, it is. The sudden consciousness that she had put another name for Oxford struck her a buffet, drowning her in crimson. End of chapter 10, read by Lars Rolander.